So, because of not having a good representation of how many Black people are actually diagnosed, then it doesn't show up in the research, and treatment plans tend to be written with a white-centric lens. What are specifically the differences related to Black culture that make this need to fill the gap important? Like, why should we be looking to write assessments from a culturally sensitive perspective?
Mhm. So there is such a gap because one, Black people may present differently than what is written in the textbook. The DSM mental health system, most other systems are completely whitewashed. So the research has been done by old white men on white men. And if I'm not a white male and you haven't studied anything other than that, then of course I may display something completely different. We see it with females who are autistic. They don't have a lot of the um, characteristics that are shown in the DSM, which leads them to be highly misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed um, with eating disorders, anxiety, other things that they are misdiagnosed with. So um, the problem is within the systems. The systems are not studying Black autistic individuals. The research is not being done. There's a little research that has picked up, but it is not where it should be. So, because of this, if I'm not studying and looking at a specific group of people, then anything outside of that I'm seeing does not fit into this box I've already created, which is leading to the misdiagnosis, the underdiagnosis. So, yeah, evaluators are not even understanding how culture comes into the room.
Hmm.
We go to our trainings, we go to school, and we learn things, but we don't learn how culture impacts our actual assessments and evaluations and tools and interventions. So then we begin to see things as a deficit rather than cultural. So if I'm coming in and I know a colleague was saying that, if a child is coming in and they're repeating a song lyric to you because that's how they're communicating, then that is being seen as a deficit rather than, oh, they're trying to communicate with me. So they're not seeing how the culture comes into the room. If I'm from a culture that I'm not supposed to look an adult in the eyes, and now you're marking me as someone who can't look at somebody in the eyes, then you're not understanding how my culture impacts that. So it's just so many ways that culture comes in the room that evaluators are not looking at, and they mark it as a um, uh, uh, market against the child rather than seeing how culture plays a role in that.
Hmm. What are some examples related to Black culture?
The one where I was saying the child may come in and start quoting movie titles to you. You may say
Okay.
something, and then they'll be like, "Oh, well, this is," and they'll just quote from a movie, and then be like, "All my life I had to fight Color Purple," and we
Mm.
get that, and we're like, "Okay," and I can have a whole conversation with my family in movie titles and songs. But if a
Mm.
evaluator is not understanding that, they're like, "Oh, this child is being sassy. Oh, this child is, d- um, doing this purposefully. They're
Mm.
trying to not listen or, whatever they may deem it, and then they mark it as a deviant behavior.
Hmm. And what are some other examples of how treatment plans can be modified specifically to adapt to a Black family?
So one, we have to get away from thinking that we're treatment planning for autism. So one, that's what healthcare professionals have to get away from that. We're not treating autism. We're treating whatever they're coming in with: anxiety, behaviors, depression. One, let's start with that, and then you also have to ask about the culture of the home. That is one of my top questions. Is are there any cultural traditions I should be aware of? Are there any cultural factors that I should be aware of that can, come into the room and hinder what we're doing here, so that I can be aware of it and maneuver with that in my scope. A lot of people just come in and they're just, this are the treatment interventions that I know, and this is what we're doing. And when that doesn't fit, then it's oftentimes, oh, this person is resistant, this parent is resistant, rather than seeing that those treatment interventions didn't particularly fit with that individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important to
Hmm.
ask those questions to find out what's
Yes,
important to the family.
yes, most definitely.
So, what would you say are some specific examples that make the Black parent experience different from that of other cultures?
One is understanding that we may come from a multi-generational home. So if I'm in my home and my mom is in my home or my grandmother is in my home, that they're definitely influencing how I raise my child. And understanding that, again, the mistrust and all of that stuff that I've talked about, those stigmas are coming into play. The religion is coming into play. So there is so much that is coming into that room with you that you have to take into consideration. So if I know that there's a multi-generational family unit that I'm dealing with, I'm understanding that there's a lot of information this parent is getting, and there may be a lot of information that I don't agree with that this parent is getting. But if I come from the approach of, you have to do what I say and that's it, that is going to automatically lead this parent to feeling defensive, instead of coming from a both and approach. Yes, you can pray. Yes, you can, go to church and speak with your pastor. And you can also do the interventions that I'm coming in here with. So it's a both and rather than an either or situation. Understanding that I'm more likely to listen to the people that I trust in my circle, which are more than likely my friends, family, and my religious supports, rather than the healthcare community. So trying to take that away will lead me to be defensive. Also understanding that I may be struggling with my faith, and knowing that I'm allowing you in here to come in with interventions for my child, but now is God going to see me as not believing or trusting in his will? So it may seem like I'm resistant, but in fact, I'm struggling with you coming in here and how it's now going to be deemed by God. So understanding that there's so many things that can be going on within that home, and you may not be even knowing, because it's, of course, not seen with the naked eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Maria, just as you're explaining that, it makes me think about a family that I used to work with when I was living in Oakland, California.
Hmm.
And we weren't getting the level of commitment that we were looking for from the family.
Hmm.
And, hearing what you're saying now, I'm thinking like maybe there was something deeper there that I wasn't seeing, that I wasn't aware of. And it's
Hmm.
sometimes as a clinician, it's really easy. I know we try not to do it, but it's so easy to judge and be
Yes.
like, well, this parent doesn't care. This parent
Yes.
doesn't care about us coming in and we're trying to help them. They're not even meeting us halfway. But
Hmm.
maybe there's more that we can be doing because we're the ones stepping into their home, into their culture.
Exactly. There's, if I'm trying to decide between having to pay my bills and be present for the 2 or 3 jobs that I may be working, or knowing that I can't get off for every therapy appointment, but I would love to be there. But if I have to choose between rent and eating versus being at a therapy appointment, I'm going to choose rent and providing food for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, individuals aren't taking that into consideration, that this parent is just doing the best that they can do with what they're given.
Yeah. And even if they can make it to therapy, maybe their mind is elsewhere and they
Hmm.
can't fully be there. Yeah, those are great points, I think, that people can be reminded of.
Hmm.
You've been watching Autism Knows No Borders. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know what you think in the comments section. Click here to watch this interview in its entirety. You can also find us on your favorite podcast app. Tune in each week for engaging conversations of how people across the globe are inspiring change and building community. Thanks for watching. Take care.